A game gave you 10 figures to fight. None of them started as fiction. Every one of them has a file. Case file number 14. 10 names. A game called them enemies. The record calls them something older. We're working backward on this one. Case 10 down to case 1. The last file is the one the record itself can't fully close. I won't name it yet. Watch closely. You'll recognize it the moment it opens, and you still won't be able to fully explain it afterward. 10 cases. 10 names. Let's open the file. Here's the pattern connecting every case in this file. Each name traces back to a specific text, a specific temple, or a specific ritual still performed today, somewhere, by someone who has never seen this video. None of them arrived as monster designs first. The game borrowed already documented material, mostly without alteration. That borrowing extends to naming conventions, weapon descriptions, and even relationship structures between figures, kept largely intact from the original record. Some of these records date back over 1,000 years. Others were finalized in a single 16th century novel that compiled centuries of scattered oral material into one fixed text. That compilation, once printed, effectively froze versions of these figures that had previously varied by region and storyteller, standardizing them for every reader afterward. Here's why that matters. Several of these figures are still worshipped, in active temples, on scheduled dates, right now. Some of that worship predates the 16th century novel by centuries. The novel didn't create these practices. It documented figures already receiving offerings. One case in this file resists a clean answer entirely. The record itself stays unresolved, even at the source. Every other case in this file closes with a confirmed identity, a confirmed location, or a confirmed date. Keep that pattern in mind as you count down. 10 field reports. 10 locations. Let's start. Case 10. Zhong Kui. The record places this case in the 8th century, inside the private chambers of Emperor Xuanzong of Tang. The emperor falls ill. In the fever, he records a dream, a small demon stealing his flute and his consort's perfume pouch. A second figure appears in the dream, large and disheveled, catches the smaller demon, and eats it without hesitation. That's not the strange part. The figure introduces himself. A scholar, failed at the imperial exams, dead by his own hand on the palace steps generations earlier. A previous emperor had ordered him buried with full honors despite the disgrace. In exchange, the scholar swore to hunt demons for the throne, permanently. Xuanzong wakes cured. He commissions court painter Wu Daozi to record the face from the dream exactly as described. That portrait becomes the template. Reproduced for over 1,000 years, it's still printed and hung in homes today, specifically at New Year and the Dragon Boat Festival. A failed exam, a dead scholar, and a portrait still nailed to doors in the present tense. The record doesn't call this folklore. It calls it an ongoing arrangement. Most surviving depictions show him wearing only one boot, a detail preserved consistently across centuries of reproduction, tied directly to the manner of his death. Later folk tradition expands his role further, positioning him as commander of a subordinate army of spirit catchers, tasked specifically with the 5 seasonal poisons blamed for early summer illness. Those 5 poisons are recorded consistently across regional tradition: snake, scorpion, centipede, toad, and spider, each treated as a genuine seasonal health hazard requiring active protection. Before you close this tab, know that the next case doesn't stay in one shape long enough to be painted at all. Case 9. White-boned spirit. The original text places this case on a mountain road, mid-journey, targeting a group of travelers specifically for their flesh. The creature approaches first as a young woman carrying food, then, once killed, returns as an old woman searching for her, then an old man searching for both. Each disguise is separately confirmed and separately destroyed by one member of the traveling party whose eyes are described as capable of detecting demonic energy directly. Here's why that matters. After each kill, only bones remain on the ground, consistent with the name recorded for this entity from the start. The underlying anxiety isn't invented for the story. Southern Chinese burial custom historically included a second burial practice, exhuming and cleaning bones years after initial burial. That practice treats bone as something that retains presence long after death, a belief this case simply extends into active predation. 3 disguises, 3 kills, 1 pile of bones confirmed each time. The record treats this less as a monster and more as an unresolved burial. The detection ability itself has a documented origin. An earlier incident in the same text places this same disciple inside a furnace for 49 days, altering his eyesight permanently. The human members of the traveling party can't perceive what he sees. He's accused of murder 3 separate times and briefly expelled from the group as a direct result. The expulsion is temporary. He's recalled specifically when the group faces a threat. His particular detection ability turns out to be the only defense against. Watch closely. The next case doesn't threaten with teeth, it threatens with heat you can still measure today. Case 8. Princess Iron Fan. The record assigns this case a single object, a palm leaf fan capable of extinguishing an entire mountain range on contact. One documented use sends an opponent traveling an estimated 80,000 li in a single gust, roughly comparable to circling the globe. Here's why that matters. The mountain the fan is meant to extinguish isn't invented terrain. It's named directly in the text as the Flaming Mountain. A real location matches that description precisely. The Flaming Mountains of Turpan, Xinjiang, red sandstone eroded into ridges that visibly shimmer under summer heat. Surface temperatures recorded there have approached 80 degrees Celsius, among the highest ground temperatures ever measured in China. A modern monument, a giant functioning thermometer, now marks the site specifically to display that number to visitors in real time. That monument sits directly on a tourist route, meaning the fictional weapon and the real geological feature are now formally packaged together for visitors. One fictional fan, one real mountain range, still hot enough today to require its own thermometer statue. The fan's resting form is recorded as small enough to fold to the size of a single apricot leaf, requiring a specific technique to expand it to functional size before use. The title assigned to this case, Rakshasi, isn't a Chinese term originally. It's imported terminology from earlier Indian Buddhist demon classification. That detail places this case at a specific cultural intersection, a native Chinese location, the Flaming Mountain, guarded by a figure carrying an imported religious classification. That's not the strange part either. The next case owns that same mountain and answers to no one who enters it uninvited. Case 7. Bull Demon King. This case is recorded as a former sworn companion of a figure appearing later in this file, before the alliance breaks entirely. He commands the region around the Flaming Mountain directly, married to the entity in Case 8, father to a child known separately in wider folklore. Here's why that matters. The underlying figure isn't invented from nothing. Ox and bull deities appear across historical Chinese agricultural worship, tied specifically to plowing and livestock protection. Spring plowing festivals historically featured a ceremonial ox, sometimes paraded, sometimes symbolically struck, to formally open the planting season. That ceremony wasn't symbolic decoration. Crop failure was an existential risk, and this figure's underlying worship functioned as agricultural insurance. A demon king in one text, a protective deity in agricultural ritual. Same underlying figure, filed under 2 different purposes. His son appears earlier in the same record under separate circumstances, subdued and reassigned as an attendant to the Bodhisattva in Case 3, one family producing both antagonist and attendant. Regional temple records list this figure under the name Niu Wang, Ox King, with shrines historically dedicated specifically to protecting livestock from disease. Spring plowing festivals historically staged a ceremonial ox, sometimes paraded through a village, sometimes symbolically struck, formally marking the start of the planting season each year. We're a third of the way through this file. What comes next doesn't fight anyone. It's born already fighting for its own body. Case 6. Nezha. The record places this birth at 3 years and 6 months of pregnancy, ending not with a child, but with a solid ball of flesh. His father, General Li Jing, opens it with a blade out of fear alone. Inside, already formed, already alive, is the child. That's not the strange part. Later in the record, after the accidental killing of a Dragon King's son, Nezha settles the debt in a specific, documented way. He cuts the flesh from his own bones and returns both, separately, to his parents, dissolving any remaining obligation between them. His master then reconstructs him using lotus root for a skeleton and lotus leaves for flesh, a second unrelated body entirely. Here's why that matters. This isn't treated as myth exclusively. Active temples across Taiwan still hold annual processions specifically marking this figure's birthday. Born from flesh with no bones, rebuilt from a plant with no blood relation to either parent, The record treats both bodies as equally valid. The conflict itself began earlier, when Nezha killed a dragon king's son while bathing, then skinned a separate dragon to wear as a belt, prompting a formal demand for justice. Even after reconstruction, tension with his own father continues in the record, resolved only when a Buddhist figure provides a pagoda specifically designed to force the father's obedience. Most surviving statues depict him standing on a specific object, a wind-fire wheel, reproduced consistently enough to function as a visual identifier across centuries of art. Annual processions in Taiwan specifically carry statues of this case through city streets, a practice documented continuously enough to count as an unbroken tradition rather than a revival. We're halfway through this file. The next case is the one I keep returning to, and I still haven't fully explained why. Case 5. Erlang Shen. The record gives this case 3 eyes, a third centered vertically on the forehead, and a documented ability to fight the file's central figure to a standstill. Here's why that matters. His worship traces to a specific real location, Guanyin, near modern Dujiangyan in Sichuan province. That name isn't incidental. Dujiangyan is a real irrigation system, constructed around 256 BCE by engineer Li Bing, without cement, using a weir and channel design alone. That system is still functioning. Right now, over 2,200 years later, still irrigating millions of acres of farmland on the Chengdu Plain. No comparable ancient infrastructure project on this scale remains continuously operational anywhere else in the region, according to regional engineering historians. Some regional traditions link this case directly to Li Bing or his son, crediting a water-taming deity for what a real engineer actually built. That crediting isn't treated as contradiction locally. The engineering and the mythology are presented together, on the same site, to the same visitors. A myth given credit for functioning infrastructure that has outlasted every dynasty that came after it, still operating on the original design. A temple at the site, dedicated jointly to the engineer and his son, remains an active pilgrimage destination, with a ceremonial reenactment of the dam's original opening still performed annually near the Qingming festival. His weapon is recorded specifically as a 3-pointed, double-edged lance, and his hunting companion, a supernatural hound, appears consistently enough across depictions to function as a second identifier. That hound is recorded separately, sometimes under the name Xiao Tian Chuan, described as capable of independently tracking and disabling targets his master hasn't yet engaged. Watch closely. The record starts getting harder to verify from here forward, not easier. Case 4. Jade Emperor. The record positions this case as the supreme ruler of heaven, presiding over the entire celestial bureaucracy the other cases answer to. Here's why that matters. Formal Taoist theology doesn't actually rank him at the top. The 3 pure ones sit above him in official doctrine. The novel simplifies this for narrative clarity, presenting a single supreme authority where the underlying religious system describes something more layered. That's not the strange part. Worship of this figure remains active today, folded into broader Chinese folk religion independent of strict Taoist ranking. Regional practice and formal doctrine have coexisted this way for centuries, without either side officially overruling the other. A fictional supreme ruler, technically demoted by the same tradition that produced him, still worshipped as supreme by everyone outside the formal hierarchy. The 3 pure ones above him are generally treated in practice as too abstract for direct petition, leaving this case as the functional point of contact for ordinary worship. His recorded birthday, the 9th day of the first lunar month, is still marked annually with specific offerings across Chinese folk religious calendars. That date is popularly referred to as Heavenly Grandfather's Birthday, observed with midnight rituals in some regions, timed specifically to mark the exact hour the celebration begins. Before you close this tab, note that the next case underwent one of the most documented transformations in the entire file. Case 3. Guanyin. The record for this case doesn't begin in China at all. It begins with a male bodhisattva named Avalokiteshvara, documented across early Indian Buddhist texts. Here's why that matters. Over several centuries, particularly through the Song dynasty, artistic depictions in China gradually shift this figure toward a predominantly female form. Scholars researching this transformation, including religious historian Chunfang Yu, treat it as one of the clearest documented gender shifts in any major deity's iconography. That's not the strange part. The shift wasn't official policy. It emerged gradually, temple by temple, sculpture by sculpture, without a single recorded directive. This case is now among the most widely worshipped figures across East Asia, recognized under different names in China, Japan, Korea, and Vietnam. The most reproduced image from the transitional period, a relaxed seated pose known as the water moon form, first appears around the 10th century and remains standard in temple statuary today. A specific pilgrimage island, Mount Putuo, is recorded as this case's dedicated site, still receiving several million visitors annually as one of Chinese Buddhism's 4 sacred mountains. Earlier textual sources describe this case in explicitly male form, with masculine pronouns and a beard, details modern viewers rarely associate with the figure at all. One deity, one documented gender transition spanning centuries, no single confirmed decision point for when it happened. One case remains before the file's central figure, then one more after that, which the record still won't fully settle, no matter how many times it gets retold. Case 2. Sun Wukong. The record opens this case with a stone egg, sitting atop a mountain, absorbing the essence of heaven and earth for an unspecified span of centuries before splitting open. Here's why that matters. Some literary historians, including early 20th century scholar Hu Shi, have proposed a specific external influence on this figure's origin. The proposal: partial inspiration from Hanuman, the monkey deity from Hindu tradition, transmitted along Buddhist trade and pilgrimage routes from India into China. That connection remains actively debated among scholars today, neither confirmed nor dismissed by the wider academic record. Neither position has produced conclusive textual proof. The debate itself has continued, largely unchanged in its basic terms, for roughly a century. That's not the strange part either. Active temples in Fujian province still worship this figure directly, not as a literary character, but as a functioning protective deity. A monkey born from stone, possibly carrying inherited traits from an entirely different religious tradition, worshipped today as neither myth nor metaphor. His primary weapon has its own separate origin, recorded as a river measuring rod used by a mythical flood control king millennia before this case's own birth, stored unused in an underwater palace until claimed. Folklorists, documenting the Fujian temple tradition, specifically note this case worshipped there as an ancestor deity in certain lineages, a regional variant separate from mainstream Buddhist practice. The stone the egg splits from is recorded with specific dimensions in the original text, precise enough that later commentators have treated the measurement as deliberate, not decorative. One case remains. This is the one I mentioned at the very start of this file. Case 1. The 6-eared macaque. The record introduces this case as a duplicate, identical face, identical voice, identical fighting ability to the figure in Case 2. Here's why that matters. The duplicate doesn't stay hidden. It attacks the same traveling party, injures the same disciple, and claims the same identity. In public, the two figures are brought before increasingly authoritative judges, first regional officials, then the Jade Emperor directly, then the Bodhisattva from Case 3. Each judge in that sequence outranks the last. Each one fails the same test. The escalation itself is part of the recorded structure, not incidental detail. None of them can separate the two, not by sight, not by interrogation, not by any spell designed specifically to expose impersonation. That's not the strange part. Only one figure in the entire celestial record manages to identify the duplicate: the Buddha, whose method the text never fully explains. The duplicate is killed immediately afterward. The record closes the case. It does not, however, explain how the distinction was actually made. No body is separately examined afterward. No confession is recorded. The case simply ends, with the outcome documented and the method left permanently absent. Generations of literary scholars have since proposed an unresolved reading, that the duplicate was never a separate being at all. The name itself refers to a claimed ability, hearing every sound across heaven, earth, and every realm between them, a trait recorded as unique to this case alone. The Buddha's identification method is described only as supernatural insight into the creature's true nature, with no further mechanism recorded in the original text. That silence is specific, not accidental. The text explains other identifications in the same story in detail. This one alone is left without a method on record. No alternate manuscript version fills that gap either. Every surviving edition of the text stops at the exact same point. Modern adaptations have inherited that same silence directly, rather than resolving it, treating the gap itself as the most useful part of the source material. The game built its entire narrative around this exact unresolved question, rather than around the more straightforward figure from Case 2. 10 cases, 10 names, every one of them traces to a specific text, a specific ritual, or a specific structure still standing today. Some resolve cleanly: a portrait, a temple, an irrigation system still moving water on schedule. One does not. The record itself never fully closes the file on Case 1, and neither will this one. Case file number 14. Closed, with one exception noted for the record. 9 cases resolved. 1 remains open, exactly as recorded, exactly as it has stayed for roughly 400 years since the printed text first fixed it in place. One more thing you should know. The case that never resolved is the one the game chose to build its entire story around. Next case file opens on a different mythology entirely, one where the record disagrees with itself even more openly than this one did. Bring your own notes. This next file has fewer confirmed answers than this one, not more. This is Professor Detective. Stay curious. The truth is always hiding in plain sight, filed somewhere between a temple record and a printed page.